Hi, welcome back to Furious Fiction. I'm Mark Mustian here with Diane Roberts. We have a big treat for you today. We have Kevin Brockmeier live from Little Rock. And he's the author of The Illumination. He's the author of The Brief History of the Dead. And he has one of my favorite short stories I've ever read that was published in the Oxford American. And Kevin, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one about the overcoat.
Yeah, I called it God's Overcoat because that's what everybody calls it. But the title is A Fable with Slips of White Paper Spilling from the Pockets.
It's a really great story. But I wanted to ask you, the thing I love about your work, and that story and both these novels there's a kind of a sense of the fantastical a little bit that's just wonderful. And I just wondered, how does a guy from Little Rock do that? Do people ask you that?
Well, I mean, I've never gotten exactly that question, but I feel as if I've spent almost my entire life in Little Rock. I was born in Hialeah, Florida, actually, but my family, when I was 3 years old. So I've spent most of my life here, but I feel as if my life as a writer is most informed by my life as a reader. And I think what it amounts to is that I just love reading the kind of fiction I like to write. I grew up reading a lot of comic books, a lot of science fiction and fantasy. And then gradually I discovered what was happening in contemporary literary fiction. But some of the stuff I love best in contemporary literature, I think, is also informed by the traditions of science fiction and fantasy.
Like what? Give us an example.
Well, for instance, I adore Italo Calvino. The Baron in the Trees. He's one of his early novels. My favorite novel by anybody. So I love all the Borges and Gabriel Garcia Marquez and writers like that. If you're talking about contemporary writers, I love the work of Kelly Link, Karen Russell, Theodora Goss, Lydia Millett, Thomas Glave.
Oh, wow.
And these are all people who occupy, I think, that borderland between the realistic and the fantastic.
Yeah, well,
it's a wonderful borderland, and and sometimes, I mean, the great thing again about your work is it kind of, sometimes that gets put off. People, that's science fiction. I don't want to read that. And there's, I think you've kind of brought it to a different level. So it's just really, really cool.
Well, a good book's a good book. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a genre, but it's really not.
Yeah, in Brief History of the Dead, one of the moves you make that I really like is that the near future, not the 24th century kind of Star Trek future, but a future we can understand, but it's not us. So we have that sense of the alien and yet the familiar all together. And tell me what led to that strategy? What were you thinking about doing? That one in particular.
That book in particular was derived from the epigraph, essentially. I was reading a book of nonfiction by a writer named James Lewin called Lies My Teacher Told Me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about how poorly history is taught in American high schools. And deep in the book, he mentions this idea from African folklore of the three terrains of existence, which are the living, what he calls the Sasha, and what he calls the Zamani. Mm-hmm. And the Sasha are meant to be the dead who have not yet slipped out of living memory. And the Zamani are the dead who have been forgotten.
The truly dead, in your world's terms, yes.
No longer than a paragraph.
Yeah.
But it was a concept that was intriguing to me, and eventually I decided that it would be a good kernel for a novel, and so that's where that one sprang from.
Yeah.
Idea of occupying, this kind of near future territory, or a territory between the realistic and the fantastic. I don't think of it so much as a strategy per se. It just happens to be where many of the stories I love best take place.
That's a great metaphor for how we apprehend the past anyway. And weirdly enough, your work reminds me some of Faulkner. I know that sounds maybe a little peculiar, but, I think you're a Southern writer, so it doesn't surprise me.
Well, tell us, Kevin, tell us what's coming next. What are you working on now? And is it futuristic, fantastic? Tell us what's...
It will sound like something of a departure for me, but I think when you actually read it, it will seem in keeping with the rest of my work. What I've been doing lately is a long, I don't quite know whether to call it a novel with heavy elements of autobiography, or a memoir with a weirdly novel approach.
That is always a problem.
Right.
Yeah, it's called Seventh Grade, and it's just a short narrative piece that revolves around some experiences I myself had when I was about 13 years old.
Some of this was excerpted in the Oxford American, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think I just read this. Well, we're going to have to cut you off there because we've got to go. But
we'll have to get you
Kevin,
again.
thank you so much. We look forward. Real quick, what's the name of the new work? Do you have anything yet?
Yeah, well, the new book will be called Seventh Grade, and the subtitle will be either a novel or a memoir or a recollective or something like that.
Kevin Brockmeier, ladies and gentlemen, so pleased to have him here on Furious Fiction. Diane Roberts with Mark Mustian, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.